Hello everyone, in this video, we're going to figure out how to find the initial value from a table. So before we do, let's go and just quickly review how do we find growth factor. Remember that when we look at an exponential function, the table for that function is going to have a multiplying pattern, right? Just like exponents. So we need to think about what kind of multiply to 6 that will bring me up to 12, what kind of multiply to 12 that will bring me to 24, and what kind of multiply to 24 that will bring me up to 48. So we know that the growth factor for this one is going to be times 2. Because 6 times 2 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, and then 24 times 2 is 48. So the growth factor is 2. So now let's think about what is the initial value, right? We know that the initial value, the starting point, is always going to be when x equals 0. So I want to think about, if I know that the multiplying is times 2, what initial value is going to fit this pattern? So I know that my starting point, if I multiply it by my growth factor times 2, it's going to bring me up to 6. So what times 2 is going to bring me up to 6? And the answer to that is going to be 3. So I know that my initial value is 3, right? Because 3 fits the pattern. 3 times 2 is 6, and so forth. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the next problem. Okay, here, first, before we figure out the initial value, we need to figure out the growth factor. So what multiplying pattern will move from 8 to 32, from 32 to 128, and from 128 to 512? What should the multiplying pattern be? In this example, it's going to be times 4, because 8 times 4 is 32, 32 times 4 is 128, and 128 times 4 is 512. So since I know we're multiplying by times 4, I know that up here, right, this jump from 0 to 1, that's also going to be a times 4 jump. So what number times 4 is going to bring me up to 8? Or let me write that down. What initial value, if I multiply it by my growth factor times 4, is going to fit the pattern and bring me up to 8? All right, and the answer to that's going to be 2. Because 2 times 4 equals 8. So I know that my initial value, my starting point, is going to be 2. Because that fits the pattern. All right, let's go and try the next one. Okay. So here, what is my multiplying pattern? How would I get from 2 to 6 to 18 to 54? What can I keep multiplying that will get me there? In this example, this is going to be times 3, right? 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 times 3 is 54. So let's know for this first jump from 0 to 1, it's also going to be a times 3. So here, it's not super clear on what do we multiply to get from the initial value to 2. So let's think of this in another way. If I know that I'm going down the table is times 3, what would be the pattern going back up? What if we wanted to go the opposite way? So I know that going down is times 3. What would be going up? How would I get from 54 to 18, 18 to 6, and then 6 to 2? Well, we know the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So going backwards, we're going to divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3. So this can be useful for figuring out the initial value, because I know that if I want to go back up, I just need to take this 2 and divide it by 3. So 2 divided by 3, we can just write that as a fraction. That's going to be 2/3. So we know that our growth factor is times 3, and going backwards by dividing, we know that our initial value is 2/3. Right? Let's use this dividing pattern going back up for this last problem. Okay, so first let's figure out what's the growth factor. How do I move down the table? How do I get from 10 to 25 to 62.5 to 156.25? So here for the growth factor, it might be helpful to use our next divided by previous pattern. So I want to take the next number and divide it by what it was previously. Right? And it doesn't matter what two numbers we pick as long as they're two consecutive numbers. So let's just go ahead and pick 25 divided by 10. So what should be my growth factor? What should be my multiplying pattern? 25 divided by 10 is going to be 2.5. Right? And you can see that 2.5 fits the pattern. 10 times 2.5 is 25. 25 times 2.5 is 62.5, and so forth. All right? So instead of trying to figure out what number times 2.5 is 10, let's think of this in terms of going backwards. So it's going down, it's multiplying. How do I go back up the table? What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we need to divide by 2.5, divide by 2.5, divide by 2.5, divide by 2.5. So anything about to find my initial value, 10 divided by 2.5 is going to bring me up to what starting point? And now that's going to be 4, right? And 4 will also fit my pattern, right? 4 times 2.5, that's going to bring me back down to 10. So that 4 is going to fit the pattern. So my initial value is 4. So one thing to keep in mind when you guys are trying to find the initial value is that if going down is multiplying, going back up we can divide, we can use the opposite to reach the top.